Good evening. You're back on with the Wolverine podcast. I'm John Borton. I'm here with Tom Crawford, special guest, special friend, always with us. And I got to tell you one programming note. You know Tom from Press Pass with Jack Ebling. You know him from his Crawford Podcasting Network, always doing the interesting and motivational videos. But we're going to have another angle to this whole thing starting very shortly, and that's going to be we'll be bringing in some former Michigan players, special guests next week. I won't tip that off just yet, but
we have teased that in a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're excited about that, and welcome back into the podcast.
Well, it's great to be back. It's always great to have, when we get into next week, getting that intel, that input perspective from former players from different eras. And it's amazing some of these scenarios of that J.J. McCarthy, Cade McNamara. This is like a rinse and repeat from a few years prior. I remember the Tom Slade, Dennis Franklin thing down when I was 14, season ticket holder, and he led him to a Big Ten title, led him to the Rose Bowl as a sophomore, and then he had no job junior and senior year. A sophomore, first year eligibility, Dennis Franklin comes in and takes his job. So this is not, totally new traction that Michigan football is going down, but still, it was still an eye-opening scenario on Saturday night when J.J. McCarthy had that opportunity, and he certainly embraced it, John.
Oh, no doubt about it. What do we got to talk about week 2? Well, how about a brand new quarterback after you've had a guy that led Michigan to a Big Ten title, that beat Ohio State convincingly, certainly not on his own, but he was a major factor in that. That got him to a college football playoff for the first time ever. 2 weeks into the season, he is the backup quarterback. Well, that's how good J.J. McCarthy has been. I've maintained to the folks on our board who have taken issue with me on this whole J.J. McCarthy thing at some points and tried to some tried to twist it into I didn't like J.J. McCarthy or I didn't think he was this good or whatever. But anyway, look at this guy. He completes 15 out of his first 16 passes. The other one was dropped. My contention is that had he not done what he's done, played at the level he's played for the past 2 weeks, and had Cade McNamara not stumbled rather significantly in those first 2 games, we wouldn't have had that announcement that we had on Saturday night, that announcement that Jim Harbaugh made that said J.J. McCarthy was going to start not only next week, but going forward. Agree or disagree?
Well, yeah, he was remarkable. And let's keep perspective here. And I had 2 conversations in the press box, one with your colleague Chris Ballas and one with your colleague Doug Karsh, one early on and Doug at halftime. And we were trying to figure out, is this the worst team we've ever seen play at Michigan City? I'm talking about the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. And we both, I think Chris and I threw out Delaware State. Doug threw out UMass as maybe a possibility, although Michigan played not very good that game, but that was a bad team. This was a bad team, Hawaii. And in fairness to Cade McNamara, I mean, he was going against more competition as a starter against Colorado State, although Colorado State went on and lost to Middle Tennessee last week, so they're not exactly stellar. So regardless, optically, I think we all saw the precision of the passes. It was actually a 12 for 12 when you really think about it. One pass was dropped. Sure. And I thought the throw he made, 2 throws to CJ Cornelius Johnson, that would have been north going south. So, I mean, we're talking in the second quarter, the big throw, the deep pattern, then that post corner for the touchdown where he kind of waltzed out of the pocket a little bit, twisted his hips and snapped that ball like a laser, and CJ caught it. Those are incredible throws. Bottom line, though, is like Harbaugh talked about, quarterback is a position of strength, and Michigan's got 2 really good ones.
Yeah, and I got to say, one of them hasn't looked really good so far, and I got to believe he's frustrated, and certainly his frustration showed in the post game after that first game. I tell you what, in the second game, if I'm Cade McNamara, I might want a couple of my drivers back, the free drivers that I gave out to my offensive linemen.
It's not the same thing.
but here's the thing about that. Even that pointed out, okay, you have a breakdown, you have an individual breakdown, and a guy slips by and he's all over your quarterback. On those two, they were automatic sacks on Cade McNamara. Does J.J. McCarthy sidestep that same guy and make a play? And that's got to be going through Jim Harbaugh's head, as well as what he talked about, how J.J. McCarthy takes away an extra defender that has to keep an eye on him for bolting out of there and running with the football.
Yeah, and I think that what that did is it ignited Jim Harbaugh to step out of his typical comfort zone and declare a starter for the following week. I mean, how many times we've never heard of that? He says, "Yeah, and JJ will be the starter next week." I mean, it just made it too easy for Jim Harbaugh. And I'm not saying I clearly don't think this battle. Well, maybe it is over, but because I think JJ is going to deliver. I think he's an exceptional athlete, and I heard an interview with him with John Jansen coming in. In the trend, whatever that podcast is, and as I was
in the trenches,
in the trenches, okay, Jansen does a terrific job with it.
No
and Cade's a very articulate, mature young man. JJ is too, and JJ, a sophomore, and he talked about that injury in the spring where he couldn't throw and what he was doing, breaking down film and looking at tendencies of different defensive schemes and pursuance from edge rushers and things like that, how the hips are showing, revealing, and where disguised coverages, maybe he's not being disguised by it because he's smart enough to figure out those hips mean this and that as opposed to this and that. And I was just marveled at the level of football intel. I know all college football players at this level are extraordinarily football smart, but wow, he articulated it pretty good. And he made it understandable for for everybody, all the listeners, dummies like me, of what goes into preparing to play football at this level, quarterback in particular at this level. I was really impressed with J.J. McCarthy on that interview.
He is prepared for many years for just this opportunity. And my 2 cents on the whole, over or not over, I think it is over until you see J.J. McCarthy either have a bad stretch where they want to call on Cade to give him a change of pace, or else if JJ got nicked up, and heaven forbid, Michigan fans are saying regarding that. I just think that he has earned this, and now it's a matter of him moving forward. I think obviously the competition is going to get better. But you can still see when he threads the ball between 2 defenders into a Ronnie Bell, when he puts the touch on that he puts on the long ball, when he is able to be elusive and run. And defenses will get better, guys will get faster that they're facing. So maybe you're not blowing somebody out 56-10, but this is going to be a good offense. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit, but I see it as J.J. McCarthy's job to lose now because of how he delivered in those first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and he didn't even have to use his legs. Maybe in the first quarter there was one run. He got out on one run, but he didn't have to. He didn't use his legs against Hawaii like he's going to have to use his legs against a Michigan State, which has one in particular really good edge rusher. And other team, Iowa's defense, as bad as Iowa is offensively, it's one of Kirk Ferentz's best defenses that he's ever had. It's just ironic. His offense is one of the worst offenses he's had. And still that game, you've been at Kinnick, that's going to be a tough game. The other thing, I feel like we got one more, we have to endure one more cream puff, if you will, in UConn. And I think Maryland is back to legitimate football opponent caliber team. And that's Big Ten. And Mike Loxley is a good coach. And I think he's got a good team coming up here. It's not a juggernaut, but anything, but it's a real upgrade of what these first 3 games are. So I'm looking forward to September 24th and beyond, and that's when we're really gonna find out how good JJ McCarthy is.
No question. And the other thing that we're going to find out, which is the flip side of this whole coin, there's unbelievable upside with JJ McCarthy, and you have to, if you're a Michigan fan, I know you have to be excited about that, and many are. And but the other side of it is you have got that last year's starter who has basically had the rug taken out from under him, and he played a role in that. There's no question about it. But how he reacts, how he deals with this, how he stays in the game mentally, how he helps JJ McCarthy out, and everything that he does as a captain, as a senior leader, is hugely important to this team. Because if he doesn't stay in it, and then something happens to JJ McCarthy, you're going in with some reasonably untested guys, at least in a Michigan uniform.
Great point, John. It's a critical point, and we all had the same reaction from the tone and body language that JJ had post game presser with Colorado State. Okay, and we're not inside the walls and things like that, but he is a captain. He was voted by captain by his teammates, and I want to believe, and I actually truly believe that he will be a really good leader. I mean, you want to talk about an opportunity, a true opportunity to be the ultimate team guy. It lies in the lap of Cade McNamara. He could be an incredible leader, which could pave the way for him if, maybe transferring to another school if that's what he wants to go next year, or or playing football at the next level, who knows, or maybe being a great football coach. Maybe he could be a good football coach if he grasp onto this opportunity of being a quote unquote team guy. And I want to believe, like I said, I believe that's how it's going to go for him. I from what I understand about him, and also what JJ says about him. So, and I think that's also leadership on that team. The other seniors are going to corral that too, and to help him along. I think he's going to get a lot of support from his teammates.
Two things that won't help him now or in the future would be if he tanks mentally in some ways, because that just doesn't do anything for you as other schools might be looking at you after this season, as the pros might be looking at you down the road. And I think Cade is certainly tough enough and smart enough to know that, as well as knowing he's a play away from once again being the guy. And he, by the time we reach the end of the season, who knows what could happen. The other thing that will not help him, and you can give me your thoughts on this, is to be booed in his own stadium. Now, I understand that I would say the vast majority of Michigan fans in that place were not among those that were casting their verbal aspersions on Cade McNamara from on high. But to hear that in your own stadium after the season you had, and after all you've put in, that just, your thoughts on it.
Well, the Michigan fan base is like a lot of big time schools where when you get the passion level, and I'm going to the stadium and it's freaking pouring rain. I walked in there like I had jumped in a lake, and it was tough. But I'm walking by all these people lined up in front of the gates, and they're soaked, but they're so passionate. They don't waver. They're waiting to get in that stadium. That's the passion level of Michigan football fans. And I sat in those stands from 64 until the early 2000s, until I got into the media thing. And so I've seen the good and the bad of Michigan fans. I've seen some really, really great Michigan fans home and away, and I've seen some really bad Michigan fans that I'm ashamed that they're wearing maize and blue all over. That happens everywhere, and that does not, in my mind, I think Michigan fans are appreciative and supportive of Cade McNamara. I think that's the case, and there's some bad apples, and unfortunately, those verbalization of bad apples comes out over TV audio.
I think it might have been the year Michigan opened with Virginia and fell way behind.
Yeah.
and then went on the
Great
road in the
example.
second game. That was Scott Dreisbach, was it not?
Yeah. Scott Drive-by, he hit Mercury Hayes in the
And I'll
corner.
never forget this. I have gotten very few players to actually laugh out loud in a press conference, but they were going on the road the week after that, and I said to Scott Dreisbach, "Okay, how do you feel about playing in a second straight hostile environment?" And he just lost it. It
Oh,
was
that's good. That's a good one. Hey, John, I got another example for you. John Navarre, 2001. Okay, not too
yeah.
when Drew got hurt. Well, no,
Mhm.
Drew got hurt in 2000. He came in there and he had an opportunity against UCLA, slipped through. So 2001, which was not a good year. And I remember I ran into his dad at halftime, and I had met him before, chatting with him, he really took it well. He says, "Well, it just comes with a job and stuff like that." And I know it hurt. I know his dad was hurting because the second quarter, I can't even remember the game that it was against. Then it might have been Wisconsin. I don't know what game it was, but it was a bad first half performance for John Navarre, who went on to take his team to a Big Ten championship and Rose Bowl berth in 2003, the last one that they had, or second to last one they had won prior to this one last year. So it's happened before. I get like John Navarre's dad told me, it comes with the territory, but man, it's got to be tough to endure for
Yeah.
both the kid and his family. What do you think his family thinks? I mean, people don't think about that stuff. People don't think about how much freaking work goes into being a college football player. How much work Cade McNamara has put in it. I mean, they
Yeah.
can't. None of us can relate to that. I mean, 99% of us can relate. It's uncanny what they put into.
Absolutely. So, if you want to, if you're in those stands and you don't want a letdown out of the guy that could be your starting quarterback in a week, or in Columbus, or in the playoff game, if there is to be one, I might want to cut a little slack here.
Yeah, you think?
Anyway, let's move on from the quarterbacks in
Okay.
particular, though, and talk about this offense in general, because it clearly in the first 2 weeks, this offense, and I get it with the opponent thing and all that, but this offense has had a lot of juice with JJ McCarthy in the game, and I think that can continue. I think that this is a team that could wind up averaging close to 40 points a game, just because they have that many weapons. Yes, Donovan Edwards, there's a concern there. He got nicked up in the game Saturday, but I just think that this is going to be a scoring machine for Michigan, with what JJ McCarthy brings to all those other weapons, and you got wide receivers that I think their expectation is seeing the ball more. Yes, you're going to want to maintain the
Yeah.
running game you had last year, but give us your thoughts on Michigan's chances for a better offense this year than they had last.
Oh, I think it's extraordinary, and I think we're seeing it. Even though, again, we got to qualify all of our comments with the competition, but I truly think when they get to good defenses, John, it's still going to resonate. It's like every week. I mean, I think what we're going to see, because you have so many great receivers. I mean, Roman Wilson has been the guy. I think you brought this up at the presser on Monday with Jim. That he is, he's been a standout in these first two games. And then Ronnie Bell got 70 catches there. We didn't see a lot of Ronnie Bell in week number one, and all of a sudden he was there. Andrew Anthony, our kid from up here, I don't think he's been targeted much, and he's a great receiver. He's a big time guy. It's kind of like last year. It took a while. They got so many weapons. I mean, Eric All. I got to look down there. Where's 83? Is he? He's got one catch here and there, but it hasn't been where they've needed that. And then you had Max Bredesen, the walk on the red shirt, where the bench went crazy. That guy must be a popular dude, because the bench went nuts when he caught that pass for 56 yards or whatever it was. So, or I don't know how many yards it was, but it's a lot of weaponry. We'll talk about Scooney and some of these other guys, and then and Donovan Edwards. I think one thing, this is a plus on the schedule, John. You mentioned about Donovan Edwards' injury. So after whatever it is, working through something. That's how Jim calls injuries. They're working through something. he could take some time and doing that, how the therapy goes and to get back on. I think they can beat UConn without Donovan Edwards.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And UConn will be another chance for, I would say, the guys up front on that offensive line to work some bugs out. They are still getting used to each other, a different man in the middle, and they've had enough upheaval over the first couple of weeks to have other guys work in. Um, Obviously, a couple mistakes on Saturday night, and Cade McNamara paid the price. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest things that they're going to be helped by in this non-conference season where there's not tons of pressure on you is to get some of those bugs worked out up front.
Yeah, and the offensive line. I mean, you think back to last year. When people always evaluate the Ohio State game as, hey, yeah, look what Cade McNamara did. They finally beat Ohio State. It's kind of, this is where these discussions go. And that back to that JJ Cade thing. It says, well, yeah, he won him a Big Ten title. He was the guy to beat Ohio State. No, it was that offensive line. Well, he was part of it. That offensive line and that defense was a huge part of beating Ohio State. Think of Hassan Haskins and what that offensive line did for him. And then all of a sudden he's running down the field, looking like a high hurdler in the Olympics. That offensive line is so key. It ended up last year as being probably the best offensive line in the country. I mean, I'm not, maybe it's not at Georgia level, but it was pretty good. And so it's going to be interesting to see how it met. Ryan Hayes, now he's back, but I mean, you got Trevor Keegan. You seems like you got somebody's hurting. There's something that somebody's got to work through, and like Carson Barnhart and all. I mean, there's a lot of names that get dinged up, and how that plays out, and to sink into one starting offensive line, it will be interesting to see how that plays out, when that plays out, and that's when you really evaluate the offensive line, in my opinion, John, on October 1st. I mean, because I don't care. I mean, Iowa still is tough up front, their front
Right.
seven, and so that will get my attention if that offensive line can carve up some holes.
I think what we're going to do is really find out also about the run game, and you look at the dynamic there that is going to change somewhat because you've switched quarterbacks.
Yeah,
I I think that we at one point talked about, well, could Michigan have 2,000-yard rushers in Corum and Donovan Edwards? And I would say my answer to that at this point is no, because you've already had Edwards have some time out. We don't know if he's going to have some more, but you also have a quarterback that's going to take a share of that running game. I really believe that there will be more situations where Michigan is dropping back to pass, but also situations where there's nobody open, and you just see JJ McCarthy take off and run. I mean, he has shown some really good legs in the first couple of games. He had a 20-yard touchdown in the first game, 50 yards overall, and then you see there the one scramble for 16 yards in the second game.
yeah, John. I think I mentioned this last year, and it bears being redundant. Back to that C.J. Stoke 19-yard run last week against Colorado State, when on that read option, that one linebacker literally, I just had me watch this guy, like literally froze his feet and went after JJ, and Stokes went right by this guy like he's parked on the side of the road. It's that taking that one guy out of that defense, preoccupied with a downhill verticality speed that JJ McCarthy has. That's the biggest caveat. As good as his arm is, that's what I think is the glaring difference between Cade and JJ, because when I watched, like last year, I mean, Georgia was not even honoring the play fakes with Cade. They knew he wasn't going to take off, and they figured if they bet on something, they'd be able to recover with him. You can't do that with JJ McCarthy, and so I think that's really going to open the running game. I think CJ Stokes is going to be that third back. And I want to get your opinion about. I wanted to ask you about this as well because I thought through this process. I mean, it's almost like Donovan Edwards is almost is a better receiver back than he is a running back. And maybe do you think that Stokes will get more carries and Donovan will still get his share, but will be in kind of bubble screen scenarios and things like that? Or what are your thoughts on it? I know Blake's going to be the workhorse, but where do you think Donovan will be when he gets healthy?
I think Donovan Edwards will be still very balanced. I think he'll get his share of carries because I think he is probably a better running back overall than maybe he's had a complete opportunity to show. But I 100% agree with you that he is very dangerous as a receiver, and he can be in that role where he's their primary guy catching the football out of the backfield and really keeping people off balance with that kind of thing. And given J.J. McCarthy's mobility, you talk about being able to have a check down or a guy even checking down on the run to him and have him in motion. It's a considerable weapon for this team. I think that that's going to be I don't think that I would usher Donovan Edwards into the category of, he's just a guy that we're going to, dump the passes off to. I think he can definitely run the football, but he will bring a lot to the table when he gets healthy. And, who knows? You may see just a precautionary sit out this week against UConn because for darn sure they want Donovan Edwards in full gear when the Big Ten ramps up.
Yeah, I see a lot of really hard running, downhill running by CJ Stokes. And Donovan does that too. But I mean, it's popped in me. And once again, 2 games, small sample size, and we'll know we get real teams when we get into Big Ten play. But I mean, I would be, this is where you got 2 offensive coordinators try to get creative in different ways to get Donovan Edwards the ball and in situations where you can spread that defense out a little bit. And maybe they have both back, all 3 back in there. Who knows? But I think Michigan's pretty strong rushing wise. And I've been hearing a lot of experts, including Urban Meyer, who have been, although qualifying the competition, says this Michigan offense could be something special. It really could. And they're ranked 4th in the country, and it pops off the screen with me. This offense could be a notch ahead of what we've seen in recent times.
Well, I 100% agree with you, and I didn't mention C.J. Stokes. You've done a nice job of summing him up, but what great feat and what ability for a true freshman. It kind of takes you back to those Michigan teams that had 2 very dependable, reliable, outstanding running backs, and then you throw the third guy in who is a true freshman, and you're bringing him along, and you're going to see him a ton more next year, just like you're going to see Donovan Edwards a ton more this year than you did last. And they got a good thing going in the offensive backfield, and C.J. Stokes is the newest big part of that.
Yeah, Michigan's had this in the past. I mean, going back to Stanley Edwards in 77. I mean, Larry Ricks came on the scene in 80. I'm like, where's this guy? They don't even need this guy. He's good. And, and Tomonga Biaka-Batuka. I mean, the list goes on. Like, where did this guy come from? Mike Hart in 2004. Think of how dominant he was that year. So Michigan's had great backs.
Oh,
they got good ones now.
When I was starting with the Wolverine, you mentioned Biaka-Batuka. He was thrown in there with Tyrone Wheatley and Ricky Powers, and then you had other guys that
Ricky
came after
Powers
that. So absolutely,
think about that. That's another example. And maybe a lot of these teams have 3 backs, and a lot of these teams have 2 quarterbacks. We've got, I mean, Michigan's up with the Bamas and the Oklahomas, and Florida had that with Chris Lee and Tim Tebow. They have depth at every position, including quarterback. And if you want to call that a controversy, I don't call it a controversy. I call it a quarterback luxury. And that's certainly a luxury they have right now at a lot of
Yeah.
positions.
Well, it's flip sides of the ball. We got Jamon Green at the press
Yeah.
conference on Monday, and I had a chance to ask him try to balance between these aren't the top offenses that you're going to be playing. This is not an Ohio State. We understand that, but how what are you seeing that leads you to believe that this can be a really good defense? And I liked his answer. He talked about the fact that you take what is presented before you and you dominate them. You try to dominate in every way you can. You try to not let up. You step on them and you keep stepping hard. And then as things ramp up, he feels like Michigan's level of defensive play will do the same. When I ask you to make that same balance, what are you still seeing, competition aside, that you like about this Michigan defense?
Well, I think Will Johnson, I thought he struggled in week number 1, and he was obviously better in week 2. Hey, teams improve week number 1 and week number 2. I think Will Johnson looked really good out there. Well, the main thing on all this stuff, when you look at defensive, Michigan defensive film, and I watched the replay the first half when, it was ones on ones or whatever. God, just like last week, a lot of swarming to the ball. And, you get a D tackle in Mason Graham who looks like a man out there, and Mozzie Smith, and uh, Rayshon Benny. It seems like there's a lot of contributors, way more constant contributors than before. Braden McGregor, number 17, a kid who we know he had that bad injury in high school his senior year. I don't think he played in his senior year, and maybe struggled a little bit out of the gate his first year at Michigan. He looks like a dude out there. And there's a lot of, Junior Colson. You can throw the names out. Michael Barrett really looked good at the will linebacker. There was a lot of them out there, and in the secondary as well. So once again, we'll find out more. I feel good about the defense. Will it be as good as last year's? It probably way too early to determine that, but there's a lot of parts and a lot of different strengths. It's not having these extraordinary edge rushers last year that are now going on to the NFL, but you have just more moving parts that are productive and they're getting into stat sheet.
Yeah, you look at that last game, and the defensive stats are so spread out
Yeah,
that it's young Mister Harrell, as we've had
yeah,
someone weigh in and mention, is stepping up and playing really, really well. And you get Junior Colson, who is going to record a ton of tackles. And D Brown has him first team Big Ten, by the way, weighing in from our watchers. And uh,
wow, that's bold.
Junior racked up the tackles in the first game, and only comes up with a couple in the second game. But that's because the defensive players just didn't play that much individually. You're throwing waves of them in there. I really think that in this third game, you're going to start to see that pared down, like like Juwan Howard will pare down his bench in as they approach Big Ten play. You're going to see more of these starters play more minutes in this one. I have to believe.
Great point. I just thought about when I was driving home from the game. I said, when this bench, and basketball is a great analogy when so many players play early on the non-conference and in the Big Ten game, and big boy basketball comes up. All of a sudden, that bench gets a little bit shorter, and I think it's going to go in this situation. Bottom line, though, what did Dave Avila say? 96 players played in this game. Think about what that does for morale. So I'm looking at the upside of a game like this, John, and not being all doom and gloom about it. Because when you get that many guys that are out on that field that feel that they're contributing, and then you're seeing the reactions, like I talked about the Mac Bredesen guys from on the bench, because they know, and you had players talking about that. They know how much work goes into on demo squad, playing on scout team, and the fact that they're on the field and their parents are seeing them, they're on the Big Ten network and their names are being called. That's huge, and that's going to pay big dividends down the road, I think.
We got Shadyville 03 weighing in from the outside and
That's a
saying,
name.
I am still worried about the linebacker position, especially depth. How does Tom Crawford feel about that particular area?
I think that's a great point. It's a point that we really haven't talked about because they haven't been exposed. But Nakai Hill Green, is he going to be how's he going to be at midline? Oh, and Mullins is in there at number 20, I think is his number, playing a lot. I don't know. I don't think it's the strongest position. I like Michigan's. If I look at the defense at the three levels, I would I would I would weigh in uh the linebacker is the one that I'm more worried about than the other two. I'll just say that. I mean, don't you feel that way or not?
I think that's legitimate because we've seen some really, really strong play out of the secondary. You've got so many guys looking very solid there. And certainly up front, there have been guys that have been, helmet sticker worthy in the early going. So I do think they've got talent at the linebacker position, but I also think that that's a place where you better keep your eye on in terms of how they develop depth and how they are able to, in an ongoing basis, really step up and play.
Well,
Uh,
I think what they need, John, is maybe this freshman Jimmy Rolder, number 30, who when he's been in there looks really good. Maybe like who's the Rod Moore of the linebacking core? I mean, Rod Moore did
mhm.
this in strong safety. Who all of a sudden like, wow, where did this kid come from? Maybe there's a young guy that's going to come in at linebacker, and all of a sudden, maybe it's Pollard or one of these guys that all of a sudden emerges and is in the rotation that will help that depth issue and will make that a position of strength. Now, those are things you're not going to really know until we get into Big Ten play, I guess.
Well, there's certainly a young guy that you're keeping an eye on in another way. Amarian Walker comes in as a one of these wide receivers that everybody's oohing and ahhing
Yeah,
about, and all of a sudden he's playing over on the defense and getting several snaps over there.
that's true.
Harbaugh says he'll continue to be a two-way player, but boy, he's getting some emphasis on defense, and it's almost like this team realizes, we're pretty darn loaded at wide receiver. Let's find ways to get more guys on the field.
I thought of another guy, because Michigan fans like to, they like to have a name to shout out, like Eddie McDoom. How about Deuce Spurlock? Now, number 15, I think he plays the will. He made a couple plays. He's a freshman, another freshman, and maybe he's one of those guys who goes in and gets that depth going. But Michigan's got a lot of young players on defense and a lot of young linebackers. But to the question and the point about linebacking, there is concern because you don't have a lot of seasoned depth at linebacker.
Yeah, and as we referenced the Marion Walker, a reminder from the crowd out there that he is 6'4", and that's pretty darn good in a defensive back if you have the mobility and can make it work.
Hmm.
Um, all right, we're coming down the home stretch. We're well into the fourth quarter, and I would be remiss if I did not note the fact that you've got a Notre Dame team that is 0-2. You've got Texas A&M getting upset. You've had Wisconsin losing a home game. Talk about, as you look around the landscape of college football, we've had a lot of focus on Michigan's schedule and how they really haven't beaten anybody. But there are some other teams that have lost to people that they didn't expect to lose to, and that is attention worthy.
Yeah, as bad as a weekend for the Big Ten when they were favored in all 14 games and they had some embarrassing losses, was a good a weekend it was for the Sun Belt. Because you mentioned a couple of those. Appalachian State, they're in the Sun Belt, and they had their big win at College Station, no less. And you had Marshall from the Sun Belt and they go beat Notre Dame. And then you have Georgia Southern from the Sun Belt beat Nebraska and cost Scott Frost his job, which he knew he was going to lose it anyway. But those are bad losses for the Big Ten, and yet the Sun Belt is a Group of 5 conference. But there's some teams down there you got to watch out for. And much as I was dogging the schedule this year and next year, there's a team next year that I'm going to be leery of when they open in Ann Arbor, East Carolina. Okay, they almost beat NC State this year, so that's one of the, not to get ahead of our worry factor here.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's almost a Group of 5 team. East Carolina is going to be a Group of 5 caliber team. But yeah, some jarring upsets for a weekend where there was only one legitimate game. When you really think about it, as far as the attention of the national picture, was Alabama going down to Austin and pulling that one out 20-19 and not playing very well, and yet they still won the game. They didn't play. They looked terrible in a lot of ways. They still won the game. That's just that's gravy for Alabama. So they got one in the hopper. They could still lose another one and get in the CFP.
Right. That's the difference between playoff teams and non-playoff teams.
Exactly.
In this game is if you have that scare early and you're yet able to pull it out. It's just
Right.
like you had that in 1997. Michigan had chances to lose games
Sure.
early on, and they pulled them out. Ohio State, when was 2002, when they many close games. So
Yep.
the close ones are to find a way to win them at this time of year or at any time of year is just massive. Tom Crawford, any final thoughts as we wrap this thing up? I know it's been a very good 2 weeks and a very change-filled 2 weeks for Michigan.
Yeah, just a couple comments. God forbid ever Michigan has a night game at Michigan Stadium against that bad of opponent. I just don't waste a night game on that kind of opponent. And hopefully, it sounds like Michigan State's going to be that night opponent next time, and that's going to be terrific. I think UConn's going to be a little step up in caliber of play. That's not saying a lot, but I think they're better than the prior 2 teams. So hopefully they'll get better. Hopefully there'll be execution, stay off the injury, keep those injuries away, and then real football begins a week from Saturday. I cannot wait to drive down to the Maryland game and feel like, okay, it's like this is what we've been waiting for, and it's been great. Go down there, and I don't care who they're playing. It's Michigan football, and it's magical. But that's gonna, we get into Big Ten play. It's on, game on, and I can't wait till the 24th of September.
I would agree with that, but I would say one more thing about this week. I think it's one of the fascinating things about Michigan UConn is this is the first game where J.J. McCarthy is flat out named the guy.
Yeah.
The guy. Okay, it's your show now, kid.
Yeah.
Let's see what you can do with it. And I think that how he reacts in this situation is just enormous, because I think one of the things that was still holding him back for a little bit was is he gonna have some turnover issues? And he proved to be absolute money in those first 2 games, and he kind of needs to certify now going into the Big Ten season.
Yeah, and I think and he's got to turn the ball. I mean, it just happens. I mean, but I think he's resilient enough. I think Cade's resilient enough. He was last year, certainly, of coming off mishaps and bouncing back. He threw an interception in the Ohio State game early on in that game. Remember, in the south end zone, they're like, "Oh God, you can't turn the ball over against Ohio State," and they still won the game. So it's part of the game. And a good point though about JJ. It's his, and it's going to be a different mentality. Although I think he's going to handle it very well. Very mature young man.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Tom Crawford brings all the maturity to this podcast.
66 years of it.
We appreciate it. Hey, and check us out next week as well. We will be announcing sometime this week which former Michigan player will be with us,
Yeah.
but it will be someone that can very well speak to a difficult quarterback situation.
Yeah. Amen to
So,
that. Yeah.
Tom, appreciate you. We'll do this again a week from now.
Always a pleasure and honor, John. Thanks for having me on.